I'm Mick and I'm recording this at my home in Scotland. Last month, had it not been for COVID-19, I would have been in the USA at the invitation of Americans Against Gun Violence to give talks describing how, following a devastating school shooting in Scotland, the UK reacted positively and almost immediately tightened its firearms laws. This has ensured that the incidence of gun violence here is one of the lowest amongst industrialised nations. The shooting at Dunblane Primary School took place on the 13th of March 1996. A man armed with 4 legally owned handguns entered the school gym and killed a teacher and 16 5- and 6-year-olds, injured many other victims and then killed himself. My only daughter Sophie was one of the children who died that day. At the time, it was described as a unique occurrence, but inevitably one that shocked and numbed the British people and indeed many others around the world. But it came as a surprise, certainly to me, that the establishment view seemed to be that there wasn't anything that could be done to stop such a dreadful event. I disagreed, and a majority of the British public disagreed too. Public safety must never be compromised in this way. Many people, including all the families of the victims, were determined that something should be done to stop anyone so easily arming themselves with lethal weapons in future. The reasons a person could own a gun in Britain were limited. For example, self-defence wasn't considered a legitimate one. Nevertheless, in 1996, it was relatively easy to buy and keep multi-shot handguns simply by expressing a wish to do target shooting. We succeeded in changing that and made our country safer. After pressure from the victims' families, much of the media, many honourable politicians and campaigning members of the public, successive British governments tightened our gun legislation and the private ownership of handguns was banned completely. There has never been another school shooting since then. But whilst Dunblane was a one-off school shooting here, such events have since become sickeningly frequent in America. More people are murdered with guns on an average day in the USA than die in gun homicides throughout the whole year in Britain. The consequences of America's inability to recognise, let alone deal with its gun problem, and the impact this has, particularly on its younger generation, was very powerfully reflected in the essays I recently had the privilege to read. Written by young people who know and experience what's wrong with the current situation in the USA, the essays explored crucial ideas and expressed clear views about why and how things should change. I read these inspiring essays following an invitation to participate in the assessment process for the Americans Against Gun Violence National High School Essay Contest. The prompt for the contest had been a position statement published by the American Academy of Pediatrics in April of 2000. This read, "Firearm regulations, to include bans of handguns and assault weapons, are the most effective way to reduce firearm-related injuries. It is so important that the voices heard include those who have grown up since this statement was made, because these young Americans have never been able to live away from the fear engendered by school shootings. And for them, the shadow of gun violence has always been there." The students were asked to describe their thoughts about the prompt, and they duly obliged. Some recalled personal experiences, often painful ones, of friends who had died, school shootings they knew about, lockdown procedures they frequently have to practice, and their constant need to seek out and be aware of safe spaces in an environment where the primary focus should surely be on education and learning. there were discussions of the Second Amendment, and it was refreshing to read some clear and dispassionate views about this, especially the flaws in its recent interpretation. There were thoughts on the influence of the gun lobby and about myths surrounding an historic US gun culture which never existed. Many candidates quoted statistics that highlighted the horrendous incidents of gun death in the USA, not just by homicide, but through accidents and suicide. There were frequent mentions of the relationship between gun availability and gun violence, evidenced from comparisons between different US states and between the USA and other countries such as the UK, Australia, and Japan. From the initial entries, a total of 24 essays were shortlisted, and each of these was read and rated by all the assessors. A leading group of 10 was drawn up, and from these I was asked to select the top 3 essays. The standard of the shortlisted essays was impressive, and this proved to be a very difficult choice. The third prize essay focused on an expression often heard but too little heeded after mass shootings: never again. The student described how poorly the USA ranks alongside other nations who have tightened their gun laws in response to gun atrocities. But the essay ended positively, relating how the encouragement provided by the movement begun by survivors from Parkland will hopefully prompt change through the ballot box. The author of the essay, awarded second prize, like a number of entrants, contrasted the scale and speed with which the USA reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic with the lack of response to the perennial epidemic of gun violence and to the tens of thousands of victims who die or whose lives are devastated each year. America has grown inured to deadly gun violence, this writer concluded, and then provided a valuable history lesson, reminding readers how, in fact, guns had always been subject to controls in America. A clear message was that the country should embrace this past, not rewrite history to justify a situation that perpetuates the epidemic of gun violence. The top prize went to a very original piece, which grabbed my attention immediately with its juxtaposition of poignant memories from the winner's formative years and harsh realities of growing up in an era of shootings. His years had been punctuated by tricky decisions about Pokemon, then Harry Potter, and later girls and school subjects. But in those same years, others had lost their opportunity to make such decisions, robbed of their lives in school shootings. There were vivid images of the intrusion that the fear of gun violence makes into the school curriculum, and a heartbreaking description of a young victim, a first grader at Sandy Hook Elementary. After giving stark facts about how little time it takes bullets to pass through a person's body, he concluded by asking, how long does it take to pass gun control? In an America represented by these essay winners, there is hope that something will happen quickly and soon. Given the high standard, I was delighted to learn that all those whose essays had been shortlisted were awarded a prize. I would like to applaud the winners and congratulate all of the high school students who entered. I'd begun to hear about American school shootings in the years following Dunblane. From Pearl, Mississippi in 1997, Jonesboro, Arkansas in 1998, and Columbine, Colorado in 1999. After each one, British journalists would contact me and ask what I might wish to tell the American people. Naively, I thought that the USA would want to follow the UK's example and said that lessons from one country would be readily learned by another suffering the same atrocity. Nothing ever happened, and in the intervening years, the shootings have never stopped. However, these essays have given me great encouragement that things can change. A key section of the population, those to whom the future belongs, and represented by the young essay writers, won't let things rest, nor tolerate remaining perpetual victims. And neither will they allow those who follow to become victims as well. The reassurance that the students need throughout their school days should be related less to how and where they can hide from danger, and more about a certainty that the danger has been eliminated. Their essays reflect a fervent wish to live free of the threat of gun violence. They ask for nothing less. And their words show that there is hope that Americans will learn to find much safer ways forward. Thank you.